Today we are diving into a story that really blurs the lines between faith, war, and, well, the flat-out impossible. It's the incredible legend of a Thai monk whose spiritual power was said to literally defy the laws of nature. You're not going to want to miss this.
But let me just start by asking you this. What if I told you there were soldiers who could walk right through a hail of gunfire, who could survive explosions without a scratch? It sounds like something from a superhero movie, doesn't it?
Well, during the Vietnam War, that's what American and South Vietnamese troops started calling their Thai allies. They nicknamed them the Ghost Soldiers. So the big question is, why? I mean, how on earth did they earn a name like that on one of the most dangerous battlefields in history? To really get to the bottom of this monk's legend, we've got to start right at the peak of his fame, with the soldiers who carried his blessing into that brutal conflict. The stories that came out of the Thai Black Panther Division were just unbelievable, but they were all so consistent. You had soldiers telling people they'd been shot point blank, but the bullets just wouldn't break their skin. They'd walk away from explosions totally unharmed. Their allies would see them go down, assume they were dead, only to see them get right back up and keep fighting. And this wasn't just a one-off thing. It became a full-blown battlefield legend. And every single one of these soldiers said the protection came from the exact same thing, a little amulet from a monk back in Thailand. So that brings us right to the heart of it, doesn't it? Who was this man? How could his spiritual power be so strong that it could seemingly shield soldiers thousands of miles away? To figure that out, we need to go back, way back to the beginning. All right, let's rewind the clock. We're heading back to the late 1800s to meet the man who would one day be known as Luang Pho Daeng. He was born back in 1879 with the name Daeng Onsaeng. He came from a simple family of farmers, didn't have a whole lot of schooling, but when he was 22, he decided to become a monk at his local temple, Wat Khao Bandai It. He just poured his entire life into his practice, and by 1918, he'd risen all the way to become the abbot. So, a very quiet, very dedicated start for a man whose name was about to become famous all over the world. When he was ordained, he was given a monastic name, Ratto. Now, in the ancient Pali language, that means the color red. And that name turned out to be incredibly fitting, because red would become this powerful symbol tied to the very first talismans that started building his reputation. Because here's the thing. Long before the Vietnam War ever happened, Luang Pho Daeng's fame was already spreading like wildfire, all thanks to a series of local miracles that just defied any kind of logical explanation. His first real test came in the mid-1930s. A horrible foot-and-mouth disease epidemic was just tearing through the region. It was killing cattle and buffalo, which were, the entire livelihood of these farming communities. The villagers were desperate, so they went to him for help. So Luang Pho Daeng made these simple lead cloths with sacred symbols, called yantras, drawn on them. He told the villagers to tie one to each of their animal pens. And what happened next was incredible. The animals in the pens with his red cloths, they were completely untouched. The plague just passed them by. Then, about a decade later, during World War II, his reputation as a protector just exploded. His hometown, Phetchaburi, became a target for bombing raids, so Luang Pho Daeng started giving out his talismans again. And the stories that came out of this were just mind-blowing. People said bombs would fall all around a street, leveling houses, but any home with one of his protective cloths hanging inside would be left standing, completely unharmed. But the most famous, the most legendary test of his power happened much later, in 1968. By then, he was so well known that a high-ranking military commander actually commissioned a special batch of his amulets. They wanted to test them, to see if the stories were actually true. And what happened next gave this particular amulet a name that people still talk about today, the Gunbreaker. So here's how it went down. Right after Luang Pho Daeng blessed the new amulets, some officials decided to do a little impromptu experiment. They took one of the amulets, set it up as a target, aimed a rifle at it, and pulled the trigger. But the amulet didn't break. The rifle exploded in the shooter's hands. That one event sealed his reputation for good, and soldiers everywhere started trying to get their hands on a gun-breaker amulet. Luang Pho Daeng lived a really long life, saw some incredible changes in the world. But you could argue that the most mysterious part of his whole story is the one he wrote for himself right at the very end. He passed away peacefully from old age on January 16, 1974. He was 96 years old and had spent an amazing 74 of those years as a monk.
But just before he died, he gave his followers a very specific and, frankly, very strange list of instructions.
This was the big one. His main command went against all tradition. He looked at his deputy and said, "When I am gone, do not burn my body." He wanted his physical form to be kept intact. But that was only the beginning. The instructions got even more detailed and even stranger. He asked that one of his most famous amulets, the 2053 edition, be placed in his mouth, and with it an ancient coin called a pud duong, maybe as a kind of symbolic payment for his journey to the next life. Then he said to cover his entire body with turmeric, which would turn his skin a golden color, and to place him in the main prayer hall for everyone to see.
His followers, being completely devoted, did exactly what he said. They prepared his body just as he'd asked, they placed him in the hall, and they waited. They had no idea what was supposed to happen, but they trusted their master's final wish. And this is the final, jaw-dropping miracle in the life of Luang Pho Daeng. His body never decomposed. To this very day, his remains are there, preserved in a glass coffin in the temple, looking almost completely untouched by time. He became what's known as an incorruptible, a living, breathing, not breathing, but a tangible symbol of his immense spiritual power. Okay, so with all these wild stories, bulletproof soldiers, plagues that just stop, a body that doesn't decay, you'd probably think his philosophy must have been really complex and mystical, right? But the foundation of it all, the thing he said was the source of all this power, was actually incredibly, incredibly simple. That's it. That was the rule. The one thing he hammered home more than anything else, he taught that the absolute greatest sin, the one thing that would completely cancel out any spiritual protection you might have, was to disrespect, to yell at, or to insult your own mother and father. And this really gets to the core of what he believed. The power wasn't just some magic charm in the amulet, it was unlocked by the moral character of the person wearing it. He was totally clear about this. If you wear his amulet, but you treat the people who gave you life poorly, then it's just a worthless piece of metal. It has no power. For him, real protection, real spiritual strength came from living a life of respect and gratitude. And that starts at home. So, I guess that leaves us with one last thing to think about. When we look at this incredible life story, what's the real reason his legend has lasted so long? Is it the stories of miracles that seem to defy physics? Is it the sight of his incorruptible body in that glass coffin? Or is it the simple, profound, and universal truth that he taught? That maybe our greatest strength, our greatest protection, comes from honoring the people we came from? Something to chew on.